idea of a president's first 100 days has its origins in the United States in the early 1930s as the country wallowed in the Great Depression. The brave and bold actions that then President Franklin Delano Roosevelt took would define both his first 100 days and the rest of his presidency. Today, here in the Philippines and here on CNN Philippines, we'll keep a close eye on President Bongbong Marcos's first 100 days.
We do not look back, but ahead. Up the road that we must take to a place better than the one we lost in the pandemic. Gains made and lost, opportunities missed, well-laid plans superseded by the pandemic. And if you ask me why I am so confident of the future, I will answer you simply that I have 110 million reasons to start with. Such is my faith in the Filipino.
We'll start with a closer look at his many firsts in office barely a week since taking his oath. His first executive act on a bill passed by Congress, his first cabinet meeting, his first public briefing, even his first Monday flag-raising ceremony. What are the priorities and promises of the 17th President of the Philippines? Good evening, I'm Pia Ontiveros. Welcome to your weekly political appointment fix, politics as usual. My guests tonight here in the studio, political analyst Richard Hidarian and former presidential spokesperson Edwin Lacerda. Hi, Richard and Edwin. Thank you very much for being here. You're all smiles. Parang ito na naman tayo. Anyway, we're talking about, well, for tonight, we're talking about the first 6 days of the first 100 days of BBM, now President Marcos. Let's begin with his inaugural address. I presume you were both watching live, no? Your thoughts muna, Edwin.
Well, it's a welcome change from the previous one. You know, the thing was, it's very traditional. It's a welcome change because there was a clear message that I will better the economy. You know, but you know, what one noticed a lot of certain statements which were not accurate.
Like,
but by and large, it was what do you,
like which ones
like
were inaccurate?
He mentioned a number of things about the father. He mentioned that he had the biggest approval mandate in history. That's not true because percentage was, you don't count it by the number of people who voted because that's a function of population, but rather you count the percentage, which is a function of total number of voters who voted for him. So there's a big difference.
As against the voter turnout.
As against the voter turnout. Yeah. So it's only 58%. That's about, if I'm not mistaken, he has the third highest.
Third.
So that's inaccurate in that regard. And also the statements about his father. But by and large, it was well written. It was a well written speech. From somebody listening to it, you'd welcome that.
Yeah, and for someone who's worked for a president, worked in Malacanang.
It's also good for the international community because the diplomats would not be if it was spoken delivered in Tagalog like how Pinoy did it. I'm sure they were just listening but not knowing what's being spoken. But here, the international community, more importantly, the international community, because they're the ones where our economy is in a difficult situation. So you want the international community to be assured that, hey, this is a new guy coming in, LC, predictability of business rules and all that. So that's something that by and large welcome. But locally, of course, the critics would point out the false statements. But I think from a quite an objective point of view, it was something that a president-elect had a good delivery.
Which line did you like best?
Huh?
Which line did you like best? A fair question to you?
Well, it's really basically on the soundbite thing. Diba? It's about your pangarap mo, pangarap ko. But the other thing also, I mentioned this previously, he didn't mention corruption. Because that's also a staple of each president when he comes in. He will promise that he will wipe out, curb corruption at least.
Right.
Here, he didn't even invoke fighting corruption, which is, I would understand that because he's a Marcos and the legacy of the father being one of tainted with corruption would not sit well and would even be attacked by the critics. So might as well leave that out and let's say some things. And it spoke about unity also. I mean, it is a very unifying.
Unity. He didn't talk about the 31 million who voted for him, but the 110 million.
As he should be. As he should. No? As he should, because he's now the president of the entire country.
Mahirap naman to start quarreling.
Yes, oo.
On
Tama
day
naman.
one, ano?
Tama naman.
Richard?
Yes, now suddenly I regret not having coffee. Not my 100%.
Pwede pa tayo maghabol ng
No, I mean,
kapengs mo.
first of all, the question I have is who helped with the speech, right? Who wrote the speech? We see a lot of rumors being thrown out there, and later now mag-name drop maybe off the record.
Ayun na.
I don't know. I mean, I heard even people in maybe Edwin can better say
I have
that.
some, but it's also.
Yeah, we have to confirm. But speaking of that, I mean, the whole event was screaming nostalgia, right? I mean, the last president that gave a speech in that place was President Manuel Rojas. This is a wartime president. We're coming out of the ashes of war. He's asking on people to help him, for the nation to rally behind him. Well, you see very much a parallel there. He's been saying we're coming out of pandemic. There are a lot of problems. So at the same time, even the critics would say that was a breath of fresh air, as nostalgic as it was. Even the style of his speech, I mean, it looks very much like his dad, right? The way he angles like that and gets the speech out.
He's his father.
Right, but considering we are coming from Duterte, some would say it's a breath of fresh air. I even heard critics saying that we're jumping from fire to the frying pan. So it's quite an improvement from what we had in the past.
Yeah.
Moreover, it was a speech that was a masterpiece in navigational politics. I mean, the way he navigated very thorny issues, right? He mentions Ukraine, but doesn't take sides. He mentions pandemic. He kind of talks about mismanagement, but doesn't criticize Duterte, right? He gives credit to his dad. At the same time, he say, let's not dwell too much on the past. Let's look forward, right? I mean, if you look at it, it was very well navigated. I mean, the way the speech was constructed. Again, I was saying, who helped with him? Is this his speech, etc.? And then the other thing is clearly he was talking to the international audience. You got the Governor General of Australia there, Wang Qishan, the right-hand man of Xi Jinping there, the second gentleman of US there. I think that's why there was a lot of English. And not only any English, the prose was really meant to impress the international community. So I think Marcoses are aware that there's a certain reputational problem they have to deal with. He wants to visit the White House. He wants to go to the West.
And
so I think
is
he was trying
visiting
to
the
also
White House.
impress the international community. That was very clear. That's all I very much I saw with the inauguration. Yeah.
So who wrote it? Who helped write it?
I don't know. I heard na baka matroll ako sa Twitter. Although one of those guys that I suspected blocked me on Twitter, so I don't know if it's really him or not.
Oh,
we
so
can talk
we
about.
You tweeted about who blocked him?
No,
We'll
he
check.
blocked me
Okay.
before, but let's get that.
All right. Oh, you know, one other thing about the inaugural, ang daming nagre-react eh, the inaugural medallion, the souvenir. No, there was a lot of reaction from netizens who were, well, Lenny supporters, Lenny voters, no. Ano yan, ba't ang bilis naman magpagawa, etc. Edwin, you have institutional knowledge kasi you used to.
Traditionally yan eh.
Ganyan.
You know, each president issues a medallion except for Cory in the post-EDSA.
I remember Digong's noong 2016.
Si,
I had a
si
picture.
Pinoy
of that.
meron din,
Yes.
si Digong meron din. So it's you know, we're living in a very polarized society right now. Unlike previously, for instance, in 2016, it was also polarized, but not quite as polarized because it became an issue of Marcos versus to a certain matagal na yung labanan eh. It's been a long-drawn battle between Lenny and Bongbong Marcos way back in 2016. So it's a quite the passion we were discussing. The passion was really intense. So you could see that anything that comes out from the Marcos side, which is pictured as being luxurious, is immediately attacked. But historically, medallions have been given as part of a memorabilia of a incoming president.
You want to say something about
Well, I mean,
Richard?
people even made issues out of his watch, right? So, I mean, like, if people are going to zoom in what is in the watch, right? And what kind of gestures people were making before the speech, I'm not surprised. I mean, I think the new president, or any president in the future, has to get used to this. This is about the information ecosystem as much as it's about the polarized political environment. I was thinking, what if I'm the president and then I make a slip of tongue or something like that? People are going to exaggerate. This spliced video phenomenon. This is the reality. So, you know,
So
it may
you're
serve
under a
you one day, it
microscope,
may
yeah.
serve in the other.
You're under a microscope and then
Exactly.
lalo na pag ganyan, no?
20
Someone as
24/7
controversial.
news cycle. I mean, this is just the reality we're going to face right now. And I think the Marcoses, right, they may have won the presidency, but they're not the kings. We're not in an absolute monarchy, right? So there's going to be freedom of expression. There are a lot of people who are not happy or passionately against him. So I think this is something that will be the lay of the land for the foreseeable future.
You know, the fact is, presidents live in a fishbowl. And that's a staple for every president. The thing, however, is the people are commenting on the very, very formal style because there's nothing yet substantive. Except, for instance, except perhaps for the first statement that he made, which was a mistake, saying that he doesn't believe in the June inflation rate. That's quite substantive.
Oh. We'll talk about that mamaya. Wait.
Right now,
babalikan
kasi
natin
there's
yan,
nothing to speak of substantively.
Yeah,
That's
well, it's
why
too early, right?
It's too early.
It's day 6 pa lang.
We're talking about day 6.
Day 6 of the first 100 days. And then, teka, sabi mo, fishbowl. Pero kanina sabi ni Richard, frying pan. Ano ba talaga? But anyway, wait. Let's talk about very quickly before we go to break. The veto on this special economic zone for Bulacan, quite controversial in the sense na, ano nangyari dito, di ba? Para bang, how did you look at that, Richard?
Well, I mean, look at it. Over the past month or so, there has been a lot of, let's call it, who's the boss, kind of moves, right? Whether in the appointments on D&D, everyone was expecting it will go to Sara Duterte. It went to someone else. Speaker of the House, everyone was expecting it to go to someone else. You get what I'm saying? And so I see this also is about showing the boss, right? Like maybe the previous administration had certain preferences, had certain networks of businessmen they wanted to work. We're going to start from scratch, or we have a different take on things. Now, on the issue, of course, look at it. He didn't only cite fiscal risk. He discussed environmental issues. He even discussed national security consideration, considering that Clark is close to Subic, right, and some of our military facilities. I like it. I mean, brilliant. I mean, I think all of the issues which were raised there, I think is very reassuring. Now, let's hope this is not just a, flash in the pan, but this is actually an indication of a reboot, including in the infrastructure strategy of the previous administration. And remember, even on the infrastructure development, Balisacan and Jokno have different takes between themselves, but also compared to the previous administration. Do we need fiscal consolidation? Do we need more PPP? Do we need more reliance on China, international investors, or domestic taxes, etc.? So I don't know. For me, that's a good reboot so far that we saw on that front. Yeah.
When we come back, we're going to talk about the first cabinet meeting and that agriculture cluster meeting that was held on Monday, July 4th. We'll be back after this quick break. Stay tuned.
I think that I will have to disagree with that number. We are not that high. We have crossed our targets were less 4% or less. Unfortunately, it looks like we may cross that threshold. Tatawid tayo sa 4%.
Let me begin by saying that the President's disbelief at the 6.1% June 2022 inflation rate figure was misunderstood. Okay? He was referring to it as a full year figure when in fact the year to date, meaning January to June, average inflation rate is actually 4.4%.
Welcome back. This is Politics as Usual. We're still talking about what's happened so far. Day 6 of the first 100 days of this new Marcos presidency, the new Marcos administration. Ito na nga yung sinasabi ni Edwin kanina, right? Itong 6.1% inflation. You had an interesting tweet about that. You said that...
Yeah, because, coming from experience, I know that the president is always informed ahead of time. Inflation rate, GDP. In fact, RC is still the NEDA head.
Right.
So I worked out a situation, a coordination with RC where every time, before you announce, 1 hour before, you give me the report so that we can go through it. Number one, so that we can respond to questions if we're asked. Number two, so that we will not be blindsided. So the president gets all these reports. Text yan, sir, this is the inflation rate. Sir, this is the GDP. So you cannot say na hindi mo alam. And noteworthy is the same day lumabas the inflation rate, RC was there. Ben Jokno was there with him in the palace. So either he was briefed or he wasn't given, or maybe they haven't worked out a system where the president is informed of any economic report. But nonetheless, I saw the rationalization of Secretary Jokno, but the question was very clear. He mentioned June inflation report. And maybe it's from where I'm coming from my experience, he was responding based on stock knowledge. So it's possible that 4.4 ang sinasabi. It's true naman, there's a target. But the question was very direct. Either he didn't hear it or it was really based on stock knowledge. But if you go through the PSA report, the reasons for the
Yeah.
increase was food. It's
So
not
maybe
important.
maybe better preparation. But they had this memorandum circular and requiring CSW complete staff work for everything.
You don't have to have a memorandum order
You
for
don't-
that. CSW is a required part of
Yeah.
government in the same way that a briefing papers are required for any CEO. I mean, that's not something that we didn't have a memorandum order for a CSW. It started by Ramos.
Yeah,
and
right, right.
every
FDR.
president is required to do a CSW so that you don't embarrass the president when he speaks.
Ganun kasi.
Well, I mean, he didn't choose to have a spokesman, right? I mean, there's a reason why they're spokespersons, right? It's a profession, right? To avoid these kinds of situations. Remember yung Solgen situation? People made a lot of big issue. So I think people are trying to say it's the same thing. Well, I think the problem was when he tried to explain the situation, it became much more convoluted. Basically, what he meant was a lot of our imports are foreign denominated, so when peso depreciates, they're going to be more expensive, and therefore that explains a huge part of our uptick in inflation.
Ganda ng explanation mo.
But I also
Maybe we can-
didn't understand why he had to justify that because that wasn't his doing. That was the previous administration. So what? Just take it.
Yeah, but that's the point. Like he was
Take
trying
it
to
and
say,
then just say that we're
wala,
working-
wala tayong mga gawa dyan. Like it's not my fault. This is because of, and he also had to say it. Hindi lang Pilipinas ang bumaba yung foreign exchange. Lahat ng mga Asian. So when he tried to over-explain it, it got convoluted. So I think the issue is less about him denying the inflation rate. It's more about him not properly grasping the issue. At least that's what the critics were trying to say. But my understanding is the president was simply saying, dollar is on the rise, peso is on the decline,
Yeah.
Imports are expensive, therefore inflation is picking up. But that's the problem. Sometimes you shouldn't explain things too much. You get into
But
trouble.
it's not a function entirely of the dollar when the inflation rises. Sometimes we had also, you can control the inflation rate, but depends on, certainly the global factors. There were global factors for that, but it shouldn't be, the bottom line is, there's a report, just take it as it is, report, and say what your solutions would be.
Okay, we have a minute and a half before we go to another break. But before that, very quickly, I wanted to talk about the first cabinet meeting that was held yesterday, Tuesday, July 5. No? Ang daming, unang-una, and ito na naman tayo, no? Because he's a Marcos, lahat talaga papansinin sa lahat kikilatisin sa kanya, di ba? Ang dami nagsabing, bakit hindi nung June 30, nag-cabinet meeting, which is the traditional and the expected thing to happen, no? I don't know. I can't remember kung
We
sino
did, but we did. Our first cabinet meeting was on
the day of the inaugural, no?
But-
Hours. It's not a requirement that it has to be on that same day.
It's really the president formally gathering his cabinet, and it was really informing everyone. These are my expectations and all
Yeah.
that. It's natural. The first one. In fact, ours was not very long. It didn't reach 4 hours.
Yeah. But is it an issue, as
Well,
some
it's-
netizens said it was, that why was it held on Tuesday, July 5, and not on June 30, Thursday?
I think our countrymen should expect each president has his own style, his or her own style. So shouldn't be judging them from what your predecessor does it. For as long as you deliver on your promises. Sa akin, simple lang yan. I mean, he did a 4-hour cabinet meeting, not to justify the president, but he did a 4-hour fundamentally economic briefing yung ginawa niya.
Right.
So,
right.
but
Oo.
problema talaga tayo ng economy. But I think that's more on form rather than substance. Sa akin, so what if it's the second day?
Hindi kasi ang daming nagsasabi, bakit nauna daw yung birthday party ni Melda, bakit ginawa sa Malacanang, ang daming pinapansin.
Hintayin na lang natin mas substantive ng criticism,
More.
which is more important for us rather than all this formal criticism.
Yeah. Well, speaking of substantive, before we go to a break, 30 seconds, Enrique Manalo as DFA Secretary, a lot of people were praising that appointment, right?
I mentioned that. When you were asking us kung sino magiging DFA Secretary, I said, Ricky Manalo should be the one. He's a very competent. I met him when he was ambassador to UK. I was in UK. He's very competent, and he's a son of two top diplomats as well. So he's steeped in diplomacy.
Richard,
Wala pang
your
DOH
opponents, yeah.
secretary, right?
DOH,
That's the
DNR,
point. I mean,
DOE.
yeah. That's why it's a bit of mixed baggage. I think, obviously there are going to be loyalists there. They're very competent technocrats there, progressive technocrats, even like Balisacan. Enrique, fantastic with Ambassador Manalo. There were a number of names we were looking at. This is the best outcome we could have wished for, right? Brilliant. I love it. And by the way, he's the first one in 2 decades na career diplomat
Right,
ang
right.
magiging hindi interim, but more or less hopefully permanent foreign secretary. So this is a great job. Last time was 2003 to 2004, diba? When we had our first female foreign secretary, right? So that's a great thing. But yun nga DOH secretary, wala pa. And we're already in the
Kasi
first week.
merong may nag-hedge pa kasi, di ba?
Yeah, that's
You
my
know?
point. 3 weeks ago, sabi ni Bongbong Marcos na he's narrowed na yung choices. So, ano to,
And
parang
nag-decline muna daw kasi yung isa, kaya...
Filipinos Got Talent ba to? I mean, ang tagal na to, di ba? Medyo priority. And so I think that's the one cabinet position where he could get some criticism for not showing urgency. But the fact that during his inauguration, tumayo siya when the frontliners were coming in, I think that was his way of saying, don't worry, alagaan ko kayo. I know how important your job is. And to be fair to President Marcos Jr., ang laki ng problema sa loob ng DOH, right? Oh my goodness. You need a big cleanup. So you need to bring someone who's not only respected by doctors for her or his expertise, but a good manager who can clean up the system because the mess is big.
Okay. Since tonight's big word is first, so pag-usapan din natin yung first press briefing. I'm sure you watch it also, Edwin, and you, sanay ka dun as press secretary, as spokesperson, sorry. What did you think of the press briefing? You know, was the media, the Malacanang press corps, allowed to ask questions? You know, was it something we expected or something unexpected because we thought na?
Yeah, I think he, except for that June inflation rate, he performed pretty well.
I mean, yung mga nagtatanong,
but it's basically stock knowledge. It's basically stock knowledge because I know, they haven't really focused on what will be the executive decisions, or he hasn't made any executive decision. If you notice in his cabinet meeting, he said that or in his briefing, he said, "I'm going to give you free rein. I'll delegate the responsibility of forming your own your organization structure, whatever decisions." He left, for instance, for the economic team, the economic decisions to be made. But that's standard. But the thing is but it's basically broad statements, motherhood statements, nothing specific, which is okay because there's really nothing substantive yet or specific that they have discussed.
But could he be the kind of president na, he recognizes that other people are the subject matter expert and therefore he would trust them, for example?
Well, apparently,
Pwede ganun.
he trusted the RC and Ben Jokno. That's very clear. I mean, he also gave them free rein to manage their own organizations, which is really an important thing. You don't micromanage. That's important.
Right. You can't.
You cannot manage. Also, one thing, he mentioned that we plan to do 2 cabinet meetings a week. If it was me, no, I wouldn't do it.
Once a week lang or?
No, I don't think.
What?
Because give
Once a
them
month?
free rein. I mean, you don't have to, you can meet small groups. Like we did it every day. We met in small groups. I mean, cabinet
Yung clusters?
even smaller than a cluster.
And not in, like you said, in the Aguinaldo Hall.
By
not
the way,
there.
if I would suggest to President Marcos, please don't meet regularly in the Aguinaldo room.
Because?
The chairs are old-fashioned, very nice craft, maganda.
Ergonomically
Maganda,
challenged.
but
Ergonomically challenged.
sasakit lang ang mga
We
likod
did an
niyo.
11-12-hour budget meeting in the cabinet room. And then everybody was saying, "Sir, baka pwedeng palitan na natin ang seal."
More from our guests when we return. This is Politics as Usual. You're still with Politics as Usual. We are on our final stretch. Joining me here in the studio, Richard A. Darian and Edwin Lasher. Renaming NAIA.
Shouldn't be a priority.
Wow, priorities in the midst of an inflation, right? Whether you agree with it or not.
Okay. Pero yun
And
nga-
by the way, respect
Yeah.
also. I mean, Nino Aquino was assassinated there. Have some respect for the guys.
And let's stop changing the names, no?
Exactly.
Streets,
I mean,
everything.
Just fix the airport or get a new nice airport for us. That's what we need now.
Bulacan nga.
Hindi unity yan, ha? Hindi unity yan. It will be very polarized.
Oo, pero hindi naman yun Malacanang si
Correct.
Teves,
Ano yan?
congressman. Okay, all right. Also, before we end the show, itong Monday flag raising ceremony. I know, like Edwin was explaining kanina, wala pa namang talagang substantive. So every little thing pinapansin natin, di ba? First 6 days pa lang. But what were your thoughts when you saw Monday flag raising ceremony? Andun siya, nag-attend, tapos may turnover ng PSG, naglalakad, natutrooping the line, sumasaludo.
Sa akin, it's a sea change. Kasi yung predecessor niya, hapon na nagpapakita sa publiko eh. I mean, talagang malaking pagbabago sa akin yun. It's like a...
I wasn't, me too. I
Day
wasn't used to it.
president. Oh, yeah.
Parang, is it it's morning.
Daytime president.
Yeah.
Richard is was a nice way of saying it.
Richard?
No, I mean, for me, I will take motherhood statements and generic comments over ad-libs and midnight stream of subconsciousness anytime. Let me just put it that way as far as...
Tsaka maaga press conference.
Yes,
By 1
maaga
hour.
and discipline
Nagulat ako
within
doon.
that. Yeah, exactly. So I think people should put things into perspective when we talk about this president. I think it's definitely a sea change for good. And let's not forget, he's a Department of Agriculture secretary too. So he has to be hands-on on that because that's a big, that's a big issue. If you want food security, you want economic prosperity, inclusive development, everything there in his inauguration, he has to have an overhaul there. Not only the department, dealing with the cartels, predatory intermediaries, taking care of the farmers. And I'm sure with RC, they're going to have a lot of coordination there, considering all the decades they worked together. No, I mean, RC.
RC is a poverty expert. That's why he can help a lot.
Okay. Agriculture, of course, one of those 3 topics in the cabinet meeting: agriculture, economy, and education. All right. Final words from both our guests. Richard, you first.
As I said, even for critics, this is more like jumping from fire to the frying pan. And to be even more fair to the new president, is that, let's take it a day at a time and then assess how it goes. And accordingly, if there's something good done, let's give credit where credit's due. If something is not done well, whether you voted for him or not, you call it out. That's how being a good citizen is all about. And let's try to do that and stick to the course, yeah.
Thank you, Richard. Edwin?
I think it's too early to judge President Marcos. All this all this criticism against him are not as important as whether he steers the country well, and that requires really reading your briefing notes, listening to your cabinet, and I hope he does perform for the sake of the country.
Yeah, well, I remember May 25, the night that he was proclaimed, he said, wish me well and I want to do well.
Right.
Because if a president does well, then the country does well.
Pray for me, I think even.
Yes, he even said pray for you. All right. Thank you to our guests tonight, gentlemen, Richard Hidarian and Edwin Lasherda. Very glad you can join us tonight. And we've been told before, don't talk politics at the dinner table or the family reunion or in Viber groups and risk warfare, digital and otherwise. But we can talk about it here at this table on the show, your weekly political appointment fix, politics as usual. I'm Pia Ontiveros. See you back here next Wednesday, 8 p.m.